big events in history are usually due to the confluence of many different factors. So if you ask, why did we have World War II, for example? Or we should talk about World War I, maybe, because we're on the anniversary of that. There was a kind of spirit of the times. There were the futurists. These were poets who were writing about manliness and character, and it was kind of a very aggressive, macho attitude. And other things like that were all happening. And I'm not going to talk about World War I. I'm going to talk about 2000. There were a lot of things in our culture. Or I shouldn't have. This should have been changed. Something slightly different. That should be over 2005. But I'll read the other. There was evolving a business culture, more MBAs. There were more business newspapers, business channels, admiration of business people. It's kind of reverted a little bit. But everyone wanted to go into business. Information technology was growing. The internet was growing. The dot-com bubble was going. Alan Greenspan was a genius, and the Greenspan referred to his stimulative monetary policy. The thought was that the baby boomers are now retiring. This is an echo effect of that boom I showed you back in the 40s. The baby boomers were now retiring and worrying about saving enough for retirement, so they were buying stocks and pushing the price up. I won't go through all of these. You have to read my book. The last one was gambling. You know, all the different, somehow we became a gambling culture, not just in the US, and I don't understand completely why, but you travel around to the world. I started asking taxi drivers, not that I have any interest in gambling, I just want to sense the culture. You go to any country and you say, where can I go to a casino? And they have a lot to say about it. And I say, is this new? Is this casino new? And they would typically say, oh yeah, in the last 5, we didn't allow them until now. So there's some cultural change which I was trying to detect. Then in the second edition, that's when I put ownership society in. I had only a couple new ones that were driving, but it was, maybe I don't have all of the points. Ownership society was a term that George Bush used during his re-election campaign in 2004. And it represented an idea that there's virtue in home ownership. He wanted to get the home ownership rate up because it gave people the proper incentives and thinking. And we also had very supportive monetary policy. This is the federal funds rate. Again, it has that simple shape. It just peaks right when Paul Volcker took over at the Fed. And then it's been going down ever since. But it hit record lows in around 2003, 2004, because Alan Greenspan was worried about deflation. And this is his opinion. He did that. It's gotten lower now. Look at where it is now. We are in a very strange world. There's no way that I can use some model to confidently forecast what's going to happen now. We've just never been here before. The other thing, let me see, where am I here? Then I'm adding to this edition the precipitating factors that are important right now. And I don't have time to get into all this, but this is my latest. This is the first time I've presented this, by the way. I'm just writing it now. And I think we had a Great Depression scare in 2009. People thought we might slip back into the Great Depression. And now we've forgotten about that. As I say, you can't remember what you were thinking in 2009. That was 5 years ago. You've already forgotten that you were worried about the Great Depression. We've had extremely loose monetary policy, which I just showed you. The other ones that I put are more impressionistic. But I think that at this time in history, people are worried about their jobs in the long run like never before. And that's because of globalization, because of the financial crisis, and maybe most importantly, because of the internet and computers and those little mobile phones in your pocket. It's amazing. Like you're walking down the street and you say, I need a drink. I don't do this, but some people do. I need a drink. You talk to your phone and say, where's the nearest bar? And Their telephone will give you turn-by-turn instructions so you can get your drink as fast as you need it. It's a different world. I mean, what is this going to do? I suppose some of you are worried about where your job is going to be in 10, 20, or 30 years. I think that that's worrying people, and it's causing them to bid up asset prices. That's at least somewhat. And also rising inequality. People are worried about their future right now. Inequality is rising all over the world, and it's a more tough world that we live in. But as for fear of the Great Depression, the University of Michigan has a nice question. I don't have the exact words, but they do a consumer sentiment survey, and one question called X4 is, what do you think we'll have in the next 5 years? Good times or bad times, unemployment? I don't have the exact word. So it's a telephone survey, and people, if they say good, they give them a plus, and if they say bad times, unemployment, they give them a minus, and they compute a confidence index from it. And you can see that confidence has been falling over, it's not just since the crisis, it's been falling, where does it peak? Looks like I can't see. Well, it's just before the crisis. It's been downtrending. It's not at a record low. This is confidence that we won't have a depression. This is 2009, I think, and this is 2011. Somehow it reached its all-time low since the 1980s, right after the near default of the US debt. But the real low was in the 1980s. And I go back and read newspapers. That was when there was an oil crisis, and people couldn't drive their cars. That's what really freaked them out. When there was you couldn't buy gasoline, and you couldn't drive, and so that sounded like the end of the world at the time. But we see we've rebounded from that. This is about inequality. This is a figure from Thomas Piketty's book, Capital in the 21st Century, which I talked about in my class. Some of you saw that. But this book was a big bestseller in the United States earlier this year. And I think that the fact that this is another thing, publishers don't know when you launch a book whether it's going to succeed or not. This is the mystery of human sociology. Or movies, when they produce a movie, it looks great on paper, and they put it out and it just flops. Or it becomes something that people like. So for some reason, Americans were very interested in reading a book about inequality. So what the book said is that we had rising inequality in the roaring 20s. It peaked around 1929. There was some kind of freewheel. It was a great time to go into business. They loved businessmen, business people. They said businessmen in those days. And then look at this. It just the inequality just totally collapsed. World War II did that, and then we had very low inequality until around the early 70s, and then it's been growing ever since, and it's creating discontent. So I think this is a factor. What Piketty says is that wars get rid of inequality. Look at the drop in inequality around World War II. Our whole attitudes change in wartime, and we become more egalitarian. So what's happening now, it kind of looks... I wrote a newspaper column called Parallels to 1937. I'm not making parallels to 1914. I'm making parallels to just before World War II. When the fears that people have, the anxieties that people have, is creating international discord, as you may note, notably in Ukraine and notably in the Islamic State. And so there's something driving this, and some people are really, they want to fight. I can't imagine myself, but I think it has something to do with anxieties. It's a little bit hard to... My hypothesis number 4 about the crisis, it really doesn't contradict any, it's kind of part of your bubble hypothesis. It's just complacency. So what happened? You were pointing out that the very people issuing these mortgages didn't have any worries. So what were they thinking? I remember I was on a panel here at School of Management in 2005. God, that's 9 years ago. I remember it very well because I wrote it down afterwards. I thought, this is a story I want to remember. And so I was on stage with Frank Nothaft, who's the chief economist for Freddie Mac. It's one of those GSEs. And I was worried about the bubble. And I said to him, have you checked out whether there's any problem? What happened to Freddie Mac if home prices fell? And then he was kind of disturbed by my question. He said, oh, we've done very careful stress tests, and we could withstand a major fall in home prices. And then I said, well, how big a fall did you look at? And he said, we've considered as big as a 13% drop. And then I said, well, what if it's bigger than that? And then he didn't seem ready for that question. And then he said, they've never been bigger than that. What are you talking about? And he said, well, maybe in the Great Depression. And that kind of shamed me out of. I would look really nutty if I would bring up things like the Great Depression happening again. But the problem is that's what drives history. It's big events like that seem so outmoded and dead. So the Great Depression was 70 years ago, and there used to be your great-grandfather who would tell you how bad it was. He's gone now, and it's all fading in our memory. So it seems totally unreal. But it's not unreal. It can happen again. Strange things happen with this crisis. One of them is the blue line is building permits. So in the period up to 2005, building permits were just going up and up, and they were setting new records. And look at how much they collapsed. That's like a 90%. It's like the Great Depression again, in some sense. Total, and it's still bouncing around. It's picked up a little bit, but not much. The red line is the National Association of Home Buyers Traffic of Prospective Buyers. And it collapsed. It just dropped off after 2005. This is well before the crisis, by the way. What happened? You'd have to go back. If you could go back in a time machine and ask people, why aren't you looking at houses? The NAHB records what their members are thinking, or are reporting about people's interest in buying homes. So this is, you referred to my expectations for home price increases. We asked people, what do you think the average price increase will be for homes in your area over the next 10 years? So this is long-term expectation. So in 2004, they were saying more than 12% a year. So this shows the worldview that people had. People thought that homes would go up 12% a year for the next 10 years. That's a lot. And the mortgage rate was something like 6%. So, and if you can borrow 90%, would you do that? Of course you would do that. You borrow 90% of the money, and that's a nice interest rate spread. The amazing thing is it started going down after 2004, and it's going down every year until, I'm using a different survey, the Pulsenomics survey for 2014. Every year it goes down. A lot of these things change gradually through time. It has nothing to do particularly with Alan Greenspan or Janet Yellen. It's just changes in our thinking. And this is what the 30-year mortgage rate. So what I'm getting the real mortgage rate by subtracting the lag 12 months. That's the orange. The real mortgage rate, it got at a record low in 2012. It was virtually zero. You could get money for nothing. Unfortunately, people didn't expect home prices to go up very much either. So that didn't stimulate the housing market. This is a figure I'm adding to the third edition, which is just the long-term interest rate. You see the M shape, remember? It's up, down, up, down. Well, it's a little bit more than M because it was going down here as well. But and why is it doing that? So the first thought comes to mind is that it's because of inflation. Inflation set an all-time record high right around 1981. And the simple story is Paul Volcker was put in as chairman of the Fed, and he decided we'll have a big recession to kill inflationary expectations. And he brought inflation down. But you wonder, why was he so influential? It's just one guy. And it's the whole world. Inflation has been going down everywhere in the world. Why? What's making that happen? It's Latin America, Asia, not uniformly, there's exceptions, but generally it's been going down for 30 years. And I think it's a change in our thinking. It's a change in our culture. There's a world culture increase, and people all over the world, all the different central bankers meet regularly at the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. They talk to each other, and they have similar ideas. Now they're all targeting a 2% inflation rate, or something like that. That's the new thing. What I did in this plot is I showed the heavy line is the long-term interest rate, recently the 10-year interest rate. And I've got 10 years of inflation. But I showed both the lagged 10 years inflation and the next 10 years inflation. That's the same thing shifted, but I wanted you to see, because if people are rational and insightful, this long rate would reflect the next 10 years inflation, right? That would keep real interest rates constant. Well, but it's not doing that at all. It's not doing anything that I can make sense out of, except recently being the last half century. The interest rate kind of parallels the preceding 10 years inflation. It doesn't parallel the next 10 years inflation very well at all. So it seems like the simple story about long-term interest rates is that after around 1960, people started to think that they should be tied to inflation rates. But they made it tied to the lagged inflation rate instead of the relevant. They had no way of forecasting inflation. So it didn't work out very well. People's thinking changes through time. I may have talked about this in my class, but in 1895, John Bates Clark, Professor Clark at Columbia University, wrote an article explaining a new idea he had. He said, I've got an idea. Let's talk about real interest rates. He said, you take the nominal rate and you subtract off the inflation rate. And then if you read the article, he said, I know you're skeptical. Why would you do that? Let me explain. If the interest rate and the inflation rate are the same, you're not making any money, because not in real terms, because goods are going up at the same rate that your money is going up, so you haven't earned anything. Then he still didn't think you understood it. So let me explain it another way. What it said to me is that people didn't know about a relation. They didn't know about real rates. Nobody had ever coined the term. And then it took 50 years for it to start settling in. And now that's kind of a rule of thumb we use. But we still mess it up totally because we tie long rates to lagged inflation. So that still doesn't tell me what to expect about record low interest rates. So I'm worried about, this is what I might talk about in the next edition, a crash in the bond market. It's gotten so low. When interest rates are low, that means bond prices are high. And it's driving everything up right now.